All right. So here are 15 black metal albums you missed in 2022, and these are definitely not picked at random. These are curated by me as records that I think either didn't get enough due or just happened to be interesting when I made this list, or have held up over time even though I never really got a chance to review them or and whatnot. So uh, this particular list this year does lean a little bit towards atmospheric black metal just because that is something I didn't. There was a lot of albums that were almost there for me that kind of got caught in the to do pile, and that's kind of where these lists come from. The best of the to do pile that never got done. And so, right up there at the top is Lunar Tombfields, The Eternal Harvest. Um, so, this is I believe this is a French band if they're on this label, and I could be wrong. Uh, but so there are four very long songs on this record. It is an atmospheric black metal album in truth, but not a dreary crescendo core style band. Rather, a very engaging rhythm guitar driven uh, record with expressive vocals and a lot of interplay between like the drums and the guitars that kind of keep it interesting, even if the song might stretch from 11 to 15 minutes. So uh, it's not necessarily going to be a type like a seriously engaging record, and you wouldn't want that with such long songs. But when it does catch your ear, it's always interesting. And I felt like um, I didn't see a lot of people talking about that in the atmospheric black metal space because it's not exactly the style that's popular right now. Definitely worth checking out. So, a lot of people consider Negativa an atmospheric black metal band. I think that's one of the things that they are. I think they're also a little bit of a depressive black metal band. I think they're also a little bit of a dissonant black metal band. There's a lot of interesting things that this guy does. It's a Spanish artist um, who so it is all about the guitar work. I think everything else is secondary to the expressivity of the guitar work, and that means the vocals are definitely a little bit buried. The drums are probably programmed or just not very good, um, but the actual guitar work sells the album, makes it very repeatable, and you know. I didn't see much praise for it in early January, and yeah, I think that's probably because the market for depressive slash dissonant black metal is not enormous uh, compared to other things right now. But I thought definitely was worth taking a closer look at, sitting with for a few hours, and sort of following the descent that it presents. So um, definitely worth trying. Dunkelheit is a Hungarian black metal band and one that has uh, more recently, they added the fellow from Barshasketh and some other bands. I forget what other band. Braun is his own solo work, and it's changed their sound a little bit. Obviously, he leans a little bit dissonant and atmospheric depending on the project, and this one is a little bit of both. But it is still a traditional black metal band in a lot of ways, and it is driven by guitar work. It is menacing, very spiritually driven, and very intense but contained black metal album experience. And I took one look at the album art. I took a closer look at the band, and then I got into the music. And I think that's a really good throughway to sort of get the full picture from my point of view with a black metal band is that the art reflects the art, and is worth sitting with, and that reflects the experience. So I I really felt like this was very underrated, and probably because a lot of people see the word Dunkelheit and they think Burzum and they get scared and run for the hills. But I thought it was an exceptional record. Uh, so the Loom of Time is not an expressly black metal album. It is a progressive black death, a bit of everything kind of band out of Australia. And for a trio, they're extremely talented in terms of juggling hundreds of ideas into each song that they write. And I'm not saying that this is like a later Emperor record necessarily, but that's one of the things you might pick up. I'm not saying it's a death metal record at all, but there's a little bit of that in there. There's even a couple of thrash riffs and some moments that feel like grind. And there's a lot in this record that leads up to a very grand, very chaotic, and not so kitchen sink as you might expect black, like progressive black metal record. And there was nowhere else to put it on my lists this year. And this does fit into sort of the progressive black metal vernacular in most ways, but it is entirely unique. I really don't. There aren't a. I don't know. There's not a ton of bands that are exactly like this. You you might enjoy some of this if you like the uh, variety of like a Neoblis Obliviscaris or that kind of band, but it's really not quite as commercially interested as that would be. So yeah, I compare it to Psy meets of Asphodel and whatnot. Uh, Serpent Fire is uh, right. They're a Finnish black metal band. I've written about them a couple of times, and this is just a very good semi-melodic black metal band out of Finland. And this is a pretty impressive release. I guess it's their second full length. I'm not that familiar with their first, but this is just a record that I immediately picked up. It immediately just sounded perfect to me. Um, I wouldn't say that they're like standard in any particular way, but it is what you would expect from a finished black metal record with a sort of a melodic bent to it. And I mean that in a good way. I end up comparing it to earlier Behexen, but you can decide where you'd fit that in. I just think it's really worth listening to. Uh, Eschatology is I believe, a trio. Yeah, and it has members of Kraft, Mordbrand as the main songwriters, and I think it's got the drummer from Over the Voids, and he played on the most recent Armageddon record on drums, if I'm correct. And they have the thing that kind of pulled me in for that one extra listen was that I didn't realize that uh, Don's vocalist guested on the fourth song. Uh, so this is an EP that's split in. It's a one song written by one of the members, split into three pieces, and then another song written by the guy from Kraft, who the song with the member of Dawn on the vocals, and these two things are different but related in interesting ways. I think that they show a range, and I think a range that would work well on a full album. But my comment was, get this guy from Dawn on the vocals full time and write more of those kind of songs because that was my favorite part of that AP. Uh, just something I wanted more of, definitely. I think it's a pretty impressive EP that I didn't see a lot of people talking about because it doesn't quite fully jump out at you. It does to me jump out at me when I see that record cover, but for the average person, it probably didn't shake the shit out of them just looking at it. Um, oh, how do you pronounce that? Cuisenaire. And this album, let's say this is an atmospheric black metal band out of Germany. It is a little bit more of the typical post or kind of underground atmospheric black metal record. It features more regular song structures. It's more of an intentionally obscured production sound with an odd artificial drum sound. And none of this would really hold with me at all if it didn't have pretty good guitar performances and an aggressive style. So I picked this thing up expecting just nothing out of it, and I really enjoyed it. I don't think that it's going to make it on my top 100 of the year, but Uh, they managed to make an atmospheric black metal record that isn't boring and limp, and I think that's an achievement in and of itself in 2022. Uh, and I thought the lyrics are interesting too. If you're willing to translate lyrics from other languages, there's a lot that you can get out of reading metal lyrics. And if you don't read the lyrics in the albums you listen to, I think you're a bit of a dunce. And that is a personal judgment which should offend you. Um, Circle of Ouroboros, this, I don't know. They've put out so many albums in a lot of different tangents. So um, I first learned about this band because I enjoyed Rahu, which was a kind of an obscure atmospheric black metal band from the, like 20, 2005, 2010, somewhere around there. And one of the members is in this band, and they've cranked out releases for a long time now. And, they're almost uniformly all pretty good. Uh, no, that's not a Christmas tree. It's a volcano, I'm probably. But anyway, it's a great record, and one that the way I heard this is one a little bit more on their sort of uh, heavy metal sort of striding, but a little bit post punk still side of their sound. It's an interesting band to talk about because there's so much to their discography that to it would be disingenuous to try to like sum up everything there is to it. But if you're interested in what Finnish black metal is outside of a couple of bands, there's a lot of really interesting groups like this, and uh, the songs I like the most are probably the ones that are closest to some of my favorite bands out of Finland these days, which are Aetheric and Blood Red Fog. So that's where I connected with the record this time around. But they put out 3 records in 2022, and there is some reasonable variety to consider otherwise. Just consider this record as a gateway to what else they can do. Um, Agent North is a very traditional, very early 90s, early first wave style black metal record from a fellow out of Oregon who is pretty young and put out 3 records in this style in 2022. They all feature kind of fiddly drums that are programmed, but they're okay, and they don't interrupt too often. The big deal here is that the guitar work is pretty solid. The style is a very clean and clear study of early Norwegian black metal, and I can't fault that because it is very classic and it's a pretty cool thing to sit down and listen to. I think that I have those albums from, Dark Throne and Mayhem and uh, what Gorgoroth and probably Immortal too, if you want to be complete, uh, which are referenced in these 3 records that he put out. And for me, it's like, do I want to? Okay, yeah. So, do I want to watch? Okay, I kind of hate this analogy, but would you rather watch an original Elvis performance, even if it's in mono, from like 60 something? Or would you rather see an impersonator on the Vegas Strip? Well, for me, this is sort of settling for the Vegas Strip. And I don't mean that in necessarily a bad way because he's really good at what he does. But it is essentially uh, a very strong impersonation of a style that I'm very familiar with, and which is, that's not a complaint. I think it's very a good job. 40 minutes of this on one record is great. I don't know if I needed 3 in one year, and I think that energy could be put into something more original, but this is good. It is worth listening to. So this is a compilation from Deviant Records, which is part of Soul Records, as far as I understand, which I believe is a German label, but they focused for this compilation. They've picked a bunch of bands from a certain area of Finland for this compilation and gotten exclusive songs from each of them for this compilation again. So, of course, I'll mention Blood Red Fog again. They close out the compilation with an interesting song, and I've talked about Samus Equinox before, but the kind of surprises for me on this compilation altogether were that I kind of basically ignored Pantheon of Blood. I think their song in here is great, and it got me to go back and listen to their record. I think it's one of the cool things about compilations that's kind of been lost over the years, that you can discover something cool off a list, and maybe that's the next record you're going to listen to for a couple of weeks or months or years, or whatever. But uh, the more raw songs on here are probably more ear catching, a little bit more confrontational, and I think those are kind of worth giving a little extra attention to if you're into compilations like this. Um, wasn't a big fan of Swampborn's Beyond Ratio. It's basically a modern, semi progressive black death metal record, which leans towards progressive black metal and melodic black metal in some cases. I really just wanted to mention it because it was very finely made, very confrontational, and seems like there's a lot of passion behind it. It's not really what I wanted to listen to at any given point, just because it is undynamic. But I appreciated all the work that went into it. There's the very long, very elaborate songs here that are well crafted, and I have to acknowledge that and recommend it to people who are maybe interested in that kind of thing. Uh, Ad Infinitum Omnia is a Santiago, Chile-based black metal band who play a atmospheric slash uh, melodic black metal style, which is fairly compared to Sargeist. I think that's the main comparison that makes sense. But you might hear elements of Take or Magua in there too, and those are just generalizations that kind of get you in the door. It's just a very fine, modern, melodic black metal release, which is particularly good. And the lyrics are all focused on philosophical subjects, a lot of existential philosophy. And I think that combination just really worked for me. I really liked sitting with this record. It feels appropriately negative and really just affecting if you really sit down and enjoy it on that level. And it's, not a record I saw a lot of people really digging into at all beyond obvious comparisons. There is some artistry there, and it is worth checking out. Uh, Horn, after quite a long string of solo releases, eventually started forming bigger bands, playing live. Uh, his last record, Moan Gang, or Moan Gong, however you pronounce it, uh, was a big deal. It was a little bit more focused on some of the punkish, folkish um, side of things, and he sort of picked it back up, gone into the full pagan black metal mode as it were, and I think created probably one of his best records yet. I think the last one is probably fair enough if you'd see parity between it, and maybe even the last couple were building up to this level of quality. I think this is one of the more refined and uh, one of the more personal records that he sort of pulled back in and took kind of independent reign of. So if you're a fan of folkish pagan black metal with uh, maybe it's just because it's a German band and it is a bit folkish. I heard a little bit of Falkenbach in some of the melodies and the way that he constructs them. Obviously, it's not done with 90s keyboards though. So didn't see enough people talking about this record at all. I thought it was exceptional and probably even better than the previous one, which I think is a tough call for me. Um, Maynock is the yeah probably the most important member of Mutilation, French kind of well, let's call it a classic black metal band. And Miseria de Profundis is I think it's really well titled. It's the artist in a nutshell right here is just this. miserable, horrifying sort of creature that he embodies when he's performing on this record. It's finely made. It's fairly uh, strong production. He doesn't, cheese it out or anything or try to go too lo-fi. But the important thing is that these songs convey something. There is this grotesqueness to them that is infectious. And I say in this review, the short blurb here is that a lot of bands could learn a lot from just embodying a character or embodying what would become their signature in this way so that their records stand out rather than blend in with others. And yeah, this is just a very underrated black metal record that doesn't hasn't been mentioned very much. Uh, and finally, we get Incantum and Strige, however you want to pronounce that. Strige is how I would pronounce it. Uh, so Incantum is Vittorio Sibeli, who was in this band Dawn of a Dark Age, which is like is it a clarinet led um, sort of like evil clarinet music kind of group, neoclassical sort of style, and this attempts to bridge that into a black doom metal style. So Incantum, the way they describe it in the press release is somewhere between the 70s and the 90s, if I can paraphrase, is basically taking a look at a lot of the dark and existential prog, uh, like Black Widow and High Tide. I'm happy when anyone mentions High Tide, but and also inherently 90s music that is dark, which is black metal. So we get an experience that is theatric. It's narrated in Italian. It's a very niche and very strange experience, which is still black metal related. So, uh, if you enjoyed Ponce's Nocturne as much as I did this year, and you're looking for something even a little bit more over the top, a little bit more strange and very Italian, that's what this is something very different. And I don't know how many people will be able to sit through it and earnestly enjoy it without being Italian because it is so full of Italian narration. But you'll at least enjoy the treatment of the key melody from Dies Irae, or throughout the first couple of songs, and that will at least give you the right feeling, whether or not you want to go further with that exploration. So, yeah, that's 15 black metal albums that I think a lot of people missed or just underrated. And yeah, do with that information what you will. Check them out. Don't bother me if you like them. Bother the bands. Tell them you like them. Buy their album. Thanks.